If you meal prep anything this week, it should be these hearty stewed lentils, because with them, you can create almost endless meals throughout the week. From a hearty bolognese to a warming bowl of carrot soup or a chili con lentils, the possibilities are really endless, so let's get cooking. We're of course going to start by making these stewed lentils, and today I'm making a double batch which will give me around 2.5 kg of stewed lentils to turn into delicious lunches and dinners throughout the week. It does sound like a lot, but with 4 hungry people, it won't last as long as you might think. In a large pan, I'm sauteing some onion with a couple bay leaves until they start to caramelise. I'm then going to add a good amount of finely chopped garlic. For this recipe, I'm using green lentils, which have 10 grams of protein per 100 grams, and they're slightly more substantial and hearty in texture than red lentils. Lentils are incredible to eat throughout the week as they're rich in fibre, folate, potassium, and also prebiotic fibre, which promotes a healthy digestive system. I love to use a good amount of ground walnuts in my lentils for their earthy, nutty flavour, but also their crumbly texture, which makes the lentils really satisfying. They're also packed with protein, fibre, and really healthy fats such as omega-3 fatty acids, so definitely get these in your lentils. I like to sort of toast the lentils and the walnuts for a couple of minutes first to enhance the umami flavour of the stew. I'm then going to add a mix of vegetable stock and mushroom stock for added richness. Bring this to a simmer, and then we're going to season it with a solid grinding of black pepper and some tamari sauce. When cooking, you want to season the foods throughout the cooking process. For example, I salted the onions while frying them at the beginning. Now I'm going to be adding some tamari. This allows for the vegetables to really absorb the seasoning and leads to a more balanced flavour. I wouldn't advise dumping a load of salt in at the end of the cooking process. These have been cooking for about 30 minutes and they're slightly al dente, which means they have a little bit of bite to them, as we're going to continue to cook them in the dishes that we're creating with them throughout the week. So these are the most delicious savoury lentils ready to be portioned out, ready for the week ahead. You could weigh them out into the portions that you're going to require. For example, you would need 800 grams for the bolognese, depending on how many people you're cooking for. So we're going to start by making the classic, which is a comforting bolognese sauce, plus an amazing rocket and walnut pesto. Heat a touch of olive oil with some dried thyme and oregano. We're then going to add the tomato puree and let that sizzle for about 30 seconds, really caramelizing the natural sugars and intensifying the flavour. Then deglaze with red wine and cook until it's a nice thick, jammy texture. Then I'm going to add the passata. Since we've developed a lot of flavour into the stewed lentils, we won't be cooking the bolognese for very long at this stage. That's why I prefer to use passata over chopped or whole tomatoes, as in this case they wouldn't have time to break down. I'm also going to add a splash of balsamic vinegar for a nice tang and sweetness, plus a good grinding of black pepper. Now simply add in your spaghetti and mix it through. I personally prefer to add the pasta to the sauce so it absorbs the flavours and sort of marries the sauce and the pasta together for better taste and texture. Now for me, a nutty and fresh pesto is a match made in heaven with this hearty bolognese. So we're going to make one of my favourites, which is a rocket and walnut pesto, and we'll be using some toasted walnuts for extra nuttiness. I simply blend the walnuts separately to the other ingredients so that they keep some of their nice texture. Then I'm going to add a whole bag of rocket, about 60 grams, to the food processor. It looks like a lot, but it will turn into the perfect amount for this pesto. Quick fun fact about rocket. The word rocket in English came from the French word roquette. We just switched up the letters a bit. And then that came from the Italian word ruchetta. And that came from the Latin word aruca. And then arugula, the American way of saying it, that came from another Italian way of saying rocket, rucola, which become arugula. Gosh, language is confusing. For the Parmesan alternative, I'm going to be adding nutritional yeast for the cheesiness, and then some white miso adds a slight tang that you would get from Parmesan. Then a small clove of garlic. I personally don't like it too garlicky, but adjust for your preference. I know some people have a really high tolerance for raw garlic. A good squeeze of lemon juice really brings it alive, and then I'm going to use a mix of rapeseed and olive oil. I find solely using olive oil can make it a bit too bitter and peppery, so a little rapeseed balances this out. You won't need much pepper as the olive oil and the rocket has some peppery notes, and I also like to add a touch of water, but you can leave it out if you want a really thick pesto. Mix into the walnuts, and that is a perfect accompaniment to this bolognese. That's good. You've got the right amount of pepperiness from the olive oil and the rocket, and then freshness from the lemon juice, and then the walnuts and the nutritional yeast just sort of mellow out the flavour and make it really delicious. Quick fun fact about Bolognese: in World War II, when American soldiers passed through the city of Bologna and tried this sauce, they loved it so much that they wanted to reproduce it at home, but they couldn't remember the original name, which is ragu, so they renamed it to Bolognese after the city of Bologna. Now for a dish that is originally from the UK, it's shepherd's pie, or in our case it's going to be a shepherdless pie. We'll be adding some hearty vegetables to the stewed lentils and some other flavourings, but first we need to make the mashed potato for the pie top. It's important to cut the potatoes into fairly equal pieces so that they cook nice and evenly. We're also going to be starting them in cold water rather than boiling, as if you start them in boiling, the outside of the potato would cook before the centre and create a sort of mushy consistency. Simmer your potatoes for 15 to 20 minutes. You can cut them smaller if you're in a rush, but it's best to leave them bigger to prevent them from absorbing too much water. Once cooked, leave them to steam dry for a little bit, and then we're going to add a tablespoon of vegan butter and a splash of oat milk for the nice indulgent creamy mash that we all desire. I'm using one of my favourite tools, the potato ricer, to create perfectly lump-free mashed potato. Season your mash with salt and pepper and then put aside ready for your pie. Of course you can cook these while you're also making the sauce to save some time, and if you want you could do a combination of sweet and regular potatoes. Shepherd's pie traditionally has lamb sadly, or a cottage pie has beef, but for a more ethical pie we're going to be using mushrooms for their chewy texture and umami flavour. Simply air fry them for about 10 minutes until beautifully caramelised. You could also fry them or roast them if you like. As well as the mushrooms, traditionally carrots and celery would be added, so I'm going to finely chop them so they cook nice and quickly. You could also grate them so they pretty much disappear into the sauce. This is a great opportunity to practice those knife skills, remembering to always keep your fingers tucked in like a claw and keep your chopping board nice and clean. It's also super important to have a really sharp knife, because a blunt knife is much more dangerous as you can easily slip off the vegetable and cut yourself. I'm also going to be adding some fresh rosemary, which works really well with the earthy mushrooms and lentils. Heat up a tablespoon of olive oil or water if you want to go oil free, and add in your diced veggies with the rosemary, a pinch of salt as well to help draw out the moisture and season the veggies from within. I'm also adding some thyme, as rosemary and thyme are a match made in heaven. Then the tomato puree, once again making sure to cook it out for a good minute or so to help cook out that sort of bitter flavour. Like with the bolognese, we're going to deglaze with wine, and then we're going to add in our stewed lentils. Next is a key ingredient, and that is Worcestershire sauce. It's essential in a shepherd's pie. It can be quite difficult to find a vegan Worcestershire sauce, so as a replacement you could add a touch of vinegar, some brown sugar and a little soy sauce, or tamarind paste has quite a similar flavour profile. Then to make these lentils beautifully creamy, a tablespoon of tahini adds a really nice nuttiness and indulgent texture. Simmer for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm also going to add a little veggie stock just to loosen it up a little bit, and we're going to add in those lovely roasted mushrooms, and then we're going to get it into a oven-proof baking dish ready to be topped with that mashed potato. Also, I wanted to add a little bit of smokiness, so I added just a touch of smoked paprika there. I like to add the mashed potato in small dollops like so that it's evenly spread and doesn't just sink into the stew. Then using a fork, I start by closing off the edges so that the sauce doesn't leak out, and then just smooth out the rest, and it is ready to be baked for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until it's golden brown on top. Don't bake it for too much longer, or else the sauce will completely dry out inside. Then it's good to go, and you can serve it on its own, or I like to serve it with some extra veggie gravy and some greens like broccoli or kale. For our next meal using these delicious lentils, we're going to make another classic, and that is a chili, and we're going to serve it with some fluffy brown rice. So let's start with the rice. I love to use some whole spices like cumin and coriander to make it lovely and fragrant. If I was doing a curry, I might add some cardamom and some cloves, that's really nice. Toast your spices and then add in your rinsed brown rice, and we'll fry this for another 2 minutes or so just to release its sort of natural nutty flavour. For perfect brown basmati rice, I do a ratio of 1 part rice to 1 3/4 water. Bring to a simmer and cook for 30 minutes with the lid on a very low heat until the water is completely absorbed. Now for the chili, and we're of course going to start with some fried peppers, and we're going to add to that some ground cumin, ground coriander, and some dried oregano. For me, the flavour of cumin is really what makes me think of a tasty chili. Once you've toasted off the spices a little bit, you can add the kidney beans, followed by the stewed lentils, which of course already have so much hearty flavour in them. Next, some passata, not quite as much as in the Bolognese, but still enough to sort of loosen up the sauce. Let that simmer for 10 minutes and then finish it off with some fresh coriander, or if you don't like coriander, then some fresh parsley or chives. After the rice is cooked, just let it steam for about 5 minutes or so, and then you can just fluff it up with a fork. For a slightly retro presentation, I'm going to add the rice to a bowl and slightly tap it down so that it stays compacted. And then I'll just tip it out onto a plate, and then you've got a nice little dome of rice ready to be surrounded with that rich and flavoursome chili. And then it wouldn't be chili without some avocado or guac and some extra coriander for garnish. Quick fun fact about coriander or cilantro, it is at least 5,000 years old, making it one of the oldest herbs, and coriander seeds have even been found in ancient Egyptian tombs. The final recipe is a really quick one, perfect when you need a speedy lunch. It's a spiced carrot soup. By adding the stewed lentils to this soup, it really makes it a proper meal, because frankly just blended veggies doesn't really fill me up. Start by grating your carrots and then frying them in olive oil with salt and pepper just for a few minutes. Then for spices, I'm going for coriander, cumin, and some ground ginger, which is a lovely aromatic combination of spices. For a little heat, I'm also going to add some chili flakes. I think I added slightly too many as it was fairly spicy. Then for the final time, we're going to be adding the stewed lentils, followed by some vegetable stock. And a small handful of parsley, no need to chop it as it's all going to be blended together. Let that simmer for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to juice in half a lemon to really bring out all the flavours. Then simply blend until smooth. Make sure your blender is suitable for hot liquids, and if it isn't, be sure to cool your soup a little bit first, then you can just heat it up in a pan or a microwave. You can use the same principle with other vegetables such as sweet potato, peppers, courgette, whatever you've got in hand, and you can make a lovely hearty soup with a nice bit of body from the lentils that's got protein, iron, and other important vitamins and minerals. Here I'm just trying to make it look kind of fancy with some vegan yogurt, also some toasted seeds and a little bit of fresh parsley to finish it off. And of course you've got to have some crusty bread drizzled with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. So there are 4 ways you can use these delicious stewed lentils, and of course there's many more, whether that's in curries or stews. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas of how you could use them, and if you want some more cooking inspiration, then be sure to check out this video. Bye bye.